All right. I mean, this is a pretty old video, but I mean, I think a lot of it still holds up. I'm gonna link it in chat.
Is the MMO genre dead? Taking a look back at the time period between 2009 and 2014, I made an interesting discovery. We had at least one major AAA MMO launching each year at that point, and in some cases you had even as much as 3 launching.
I'm going to say right away, this was because they were trying to replicate World of Warcraft. World of Warcraft was making a lot of money. Back in 2009, there was no Discord, there was no like huge social media type thingies, so people used MMOs because it was like, look at this, I can talk to my friends in a different world. World of Warcraft in many ways is what Discord is to a lot of people now. Do you think teenagers these years are not into MMOs? 13 to 18? I think they would be if something big happened. You know why? Look at how much hype a game like Fortnite gets. And I don't think an MMO necessarily... The way we think of MMOs is grinding. And the way we think of, like, people nowadays, like children nowadays or younger people nowadays, is they don't want to invest time in these things. You know, that's how we think. I'm a Zoomer. I am a Zoomer. I would love to. So I can't really speak for whatever the next generation is, but I think much of it revolves around hype and excitement, which is why I say if we had a game that was an actual living, breathing world, and it took that generational leap from something like World of Warcraft, where the only, like, why does Fortnite feel more alive than World of Warcraft? Why is that? Why is that? Can you imagine a MMO where things happen like on a weekly basis? Just events happen on a weekly basis. Something changes in the world. I think it's that sort of stuff that would attract a younger audience. Because it feels like the game is exciting, it is new, everyone is talking about it. Did you hear what's happening this week? It's that sort of stuff. You know? Obviously, I don't know, because I look at TikTok and my brain starts, like, pouring out of my ear. So maybe I'm not the best person to listen to this. But, you know. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, right? I'm not comparing Fortnite to the MMO genre in the sense that it's the same thing. I don't. But I think a lot of what like really drives Fortnite's success is not just the fact that it's a battle royale and you can jump in and you can jump out. I think it's these collaborations, the big events they have, the actual, like, living, breathing world things that happen in the game. I think much of that is what's kept Fortnite on top, and not just the actual game. The game is fine, but I think it's everything surrounding the game and the culture surrounding the game that is really driving that hype. So if there was an MMO that took that generational leap, 100% I think it could be successful.
MMOs were being churned out quite frequently, but as we look past the year of 2014 up until the end of 2017, that trend has certainly ceased. Sure, you still have MMOs launching.
And by the way, people were saying the same exact thing when I was a wee young lad. I was always the youngest person in the guild, always, and by a long shot too. I was always the youngest.
Mostly smaller ones, but really the only large MMOs that have launched in this 3-year period have been localizations of MMOs that launched in Korea or abroad in general. In some cases, these localizations are from games that are years old at the point of relaunch. Take, for example, Black Desert, Arcade, and Blade and Soul. During the 2015 to early 2018 periods, we have seen next to no AAA
Oh, a lot
MMOs.
of these, I can move my face. A lot of them actually have the, I know most of these, yeah, but probably not all of them. Hold on, let me move my face. There is an actual logo behind my face.
Launch. No unique intellectual properties launched by a large corporation or company. That's a bit scary, and certainly has some people thinking that perhaps the MMO genre as we knew it might be dying or already dead. Keyword, as we knew it. MMOs as we knew them might
Which, by the way, like, 100% hot take, whenever, like, VR really takes off, MMOs will be the biggest genre, by a long shot. By an absolute country mile, when we get VR that isn't wearing a brick on your face, MMOs will be the biggest genre. It won't even be close.
Dead, and there's certainly interesting reasons for that, which I will cover in this video.
Played most of these
But
games?
the new
No.
age of MMOs
No.
seems to be in the world of crowdfunding. As of now, there are 6 major MMOs that are currently in development using a crowdfunding method. Crowfall, Star Citizen, Camelot Unchained, Shroud of the Avatar, Ashes of Creation, and Chronicles of Alaria were all funded using crowdfunding platforms.
Well, don't I like... Please don't tell me the video talks about them. Okay, it doesn't. I'm so glad I have the benefit of hindsight, because we all know how those turned out.
All of which are still in development, some as
Chronicles
long as 5
of
years
Alaria.
in the case of Star Citizen. Star Citizen most impressively has the largest of the budgets, totaling at $175 million. Likely larger than the Star Wars The Old Republic's famously large budget even. While the other MMOs are in between the $3 to $20 million range in regards to their budget, this market shift is obviously quite interesting. Why did MMOs go from being funded by publishers to being funded by backers? Why have AAA developers or companies shied away from making MMOs? Well, at least in the Western market, many of these old-school titans of MMO developers
I played a bit
prefer
of
to
Blade and
rely
Soul,
on
it was pretty
milking
good.
localizations of Korean games, such as Arcade, Black Desert, Blade and Soul, and Revelation Online. Even old MMO titan-like developers such as NCSoft seem wary.
Which, by the way, also, we talked about, like, younger audiences playing these games. I think the problem is there is currently not the MMO. You know, I meme about this, right? But we talk about a dying game. D4 bad. Why would you want to play the dying game? You need to have your opinion validated by people on the internet, right? That's how we work. So when people hear that WoW is dying, and people are talking about WoW being in a bad place, and they say, I went to FF14, right? And they're like, oh my god, so there are these 2 big things, but then I hear FF14 is also making mistakes. I think, like, the current way of thinking about these MMOs especially is because they require a ton of time investment, at least as they are right now. No one wants to try them because there is no the MMO. There is not like a single big game that they want to get stuck into. Everything is old, everything is antiquated, and there is nothing new. So until we have one of these big projects actually come out and be good, I don't think it's going to capture a new audience at all. I think all of the MMOs that have come out recently are just tapping into the MMO market, not new people.
To invest in a new MMO IP. And news sites like MMORPG.com and Massively and such are continuing to perpetrate that games such as H1Z1 and Fortnite are MMO.
Exactly, because it is the big game. We need another World of Warcraft where everyone is talking about the game. You know? I wouldn't say D4 is not bad. It is made for a new audience that will play the campaign for 30 hours and put the game on the shelf. Yeah, but that is fundamentally not what an MMO is. You know, and that's what I mean. D4 is fundamentally different from an MMO because you don't want to put it down. What you need to do is people need to be talking about this new thing. You know what was the best thing to ever happen to World of Warcraft? The best thing to ever happen to World of Warcraft was news stations warning parents about not letting children play World of Warcraft. That was the best thing that could have ever happened to the game. Because imagine the 15-year-old, oh my god, there is this game that is so addictive that everyone is talking about it. It's being talked about on the news. Oh my god, of course I want to play it. Of course I want to see what it is. Oh, this must be a good game. It's literally as simple as that. It's happening to Minecraft even to this day. Yes, and ditto for Fortnite. People need to talk about this game. People need to know that it's the big thing. We just don't have that right now.
MMOs. But things weren't always so bleak. MMO's popularity exploded in the periods of 2004 to 2014. 2004 saw launches of City of Heroes, World of Warcraft, and EverQuest 2. World of Warcraft, of course, most notably, is still the king of the MMO space, easily eclipsing other MMOs in population, sub-numbers.
I think World of Warcraft is one of those games that did more bad than good in the long run. It just destroyed the genre. Like, for the next decade, everyone was trying to be World of Warcraft. And that's not good. No one was trying to beat World of Warcraft. Everyone was trying to be World of Warcraft. That's not good.
And revenue made. If there's one thing we know about investors/publishers, is they can smell when a market seems ripe for the taking, and certainly how to gouge the hell out of it on the more extreme end. As World of Warcraft succeeded all expectations ever thought possible in the space, investors wanted to create MMOs of their own. This is why the period of the time mentioned was essentially a gold rush akin to the miners in California finding gold back in the 1840s. The period of 2004 to 2014 is just insane in terms of MMO's growth. Every publisher started picking key developers with the full intention to create an MMO. I mean, why not? World of Warcraft was reaching levels of success never thought possible. Multiple millions of subscribers all paying $15 price tags monthly?
Oh my god, I remember when they were reporting the numbers, everyone was so happy. It was like, WoW just hit 15 million subscribers. Good times.
Sign me up, said publishers and developers. When a market first starts off or takes off, the barriers of entry are quite low. In the case of MMO's early games, didn't have the largest of budgets. Nothing like they do now at least, so it seemed to be financially viable to pursue making an MMO with the hope that it really took off and continued to be a fruitful business for years to come. It theoretically could have been the gift that kept on giving. What these companies didn't realize was how difficult the MMO space would be to succeed in, or how dominant WoW would be ultimately. WoW in many ways has contributed to the failures of other games both indirectly and directly. When a competitor in a market is very strong, they can kill competitors without actually ever having to lift a finger.
Yep.
When a new company fails to
You know what happens? Complacency kicks in. I think so.
match up to the already well-established company, which is hard to do at this point since the company, like WoW in this case, has such a large market share already, they can end up dying due to the lack of popularity. Some of these companies can exist within a niche in the market, say for example the way certain sandbox titles or MMOs such as Final Fantasy XI back then have been able to survive for such a long time even to this day, but these aren't very common. And thus when these
I think I remember reading about Final Fantasy XIV when they just remade the game from scratch. Didn't Yoshi P say that we looked at WoW, we looked at what worked in World of Warcraft and we just did that? I'm pretty sure I remember reading something like that.
companies in MMOs start to fail, as I have outlined many of these on my channel, developers crumbled, publishers started to pull away from MMOs, no longer deeming them viable for making money. Failures aren't without consequences. Obviously,
By the way, I do think the next big MMO will come from a private company. I don't think it will be something with something that is publicly traded. I think it's going to be a Baldur's Gate situation.
a small scale, this is always true, but on a large scale, the sanctity of a given market, MMOs in this case, failure, especially large ones, scares away investors, publishers who might not have been involved in the market yet, and it certainly scares those away who have already failed in their investments. The gold rush was running out. It baffles me when MMO goers ask the question of why aren't MMOs as popular nowadays, when the answer is staring us all in the face. My entire series, Death of a Game, chronicles many of these previously failed MMOs and the reasons for their failure. These collectively are the largest reason why MMOs have lost.
Well, the MMO genre fundamentally is all or nothing. You make the biggest, most complex genre game possible, and either people play it, or it's dead. There is no in between. There is no, oh, we'll recoup the cost over 15 years by selling it on Steam, and sometimes people will join in. No. Like, if the game just doesn't make its money back, you will have to shut down the servers, and you will not make any revenue from the game at all. So it is either you'll be banking on this thing for the next decade, or you just lost probably a year's worth of investment. It's kind of,
favor in the eyes of the industry. Sure, creatives still want to make MMOs. Who wouldn't want to create an entire universe of a game that could be played by millions and have far more depth than most games? But when things don't make sense from a business perspective anymore, or are deemed too risky to partake in, we see as little MMOs released by AAA companies like we do now. Now, of course, there are many factors as to why the AAA MMO is all but dead at this point. Many of these failed MMOs. And
by the way, I also find it very interesting how GTA Online became a MMO light over the years. It has a lot of elements what makes an MMO. It's not an MMO, really, but it has a lot of elements that is basically an MMO. I'm curious to see what they do with, because keep in mind, GTA 5, the online mode, was such an afterthought that it wasn't even in the game when it came out. The online mode came like a month or something after. GTA 6, you better believe it, is built with online as the first stepping stone. GTA 5 has brought in a mind-boggling amount of money. 1,000,000% GTA 6's first priority is probably the online mode. I'm not gonna lie.
Some way try to sort of copy what made an MMO like World of Warcraft successful, failing to realize that World of Warcraft was practically lightning trapped in a bottle. We won't see that same level of success and fanaticism in some time.
Because WoW was a leap. WoW was a leap that the genre needed. Obviously, I was a small lad. I've read about this in the ancient scrolls, so I don't know about much of this myself. But I think it was EverQuest that WoW sort of preceded, right? A lot of the MMOs back in the day, from what I understand, they were like a lot more hardcore. WoW took aspects of it, but made it accessible. So you didn't lose XP on death. You didn't lose your stuff on death. You didn't do a bunch of these things. They made an open world. So instead of going between zones, the whole world was open. You didn't lose all your stuff. It was the casual MMO. It's only now that people say classic is hard, even though, you know, it's not really hard. It's like, it's mechanically finicky and that's it. It's not really hard. But yeah, WoW was a leap. We just haven't had a leap since WoW. That's the problem.
Treating it like the metric to reach was delusional, almost like the popping of a bubble for some. Some markets, like the MMO market, are boom and bust. They have fluctuating levels of success or involvement by big companies. The MMO space is certainly in a bit of a bust or down period at this time, but all it takes is for another MMO to make big things and be successful for the market to have an influx in players again. But this will prove difficult, as it would take a publisher or developer to take yet another big chance on an ever-fluctuating market, a market that frankly is having a bit of an identity crisis at this point. Currently, MMOs aren't really social, which is why and how they were formed successfully in the first place, really. Things are so streamlined nowadays that human interaction is sort of an afterthought, which certainly...
Games are now our theme parks. That's the problem. An MMO should feel like a living, breathing world, which is why I compared it to Fortnite, which is a terrible comparison, but is the best one I have. It is the most updated game with the most stuff going on at all times. It feels more living and breathing than an MMO.
It shows how conflicted the MMO space is at the moment. Not to mention with the constant rise of battle royale type games, player interactions and human interactions.
Oh my god, this was when PUBG was at its peak. Oh my god, this was such a good time. We came back from school with the boys, hopped on, played PUBG for like 5 hours. Oh, that was so good.
An all-time low in certain regards.
That was so good.
Things like free-to-play games with loot boxes and crazy microtransactions.
Such a good time.
And you have a bit of a landmine field. Not quite easy to navigate for a company looking to craft a successful MMO. Well, that was until platforms such as Kickstarter started to find popularity.
Oh, let's see how this
Suddenly, developers realized instead of having to track down a publisher and potentially sell your company or your soul if you fail, you could go directly to the audience or gamers and have them back your operating and development costs. Really, crowdfunding platforms have been a game changer in the gaming.
I do think crowdfunding could result in something incredible. I think the problem is with crowdfunding currently is that people sell ideas and most of them have literally no idea how to carry out any of it. This was like when we were in the doomer phase of MMOs. This is when, well, yeah, this was like around WoD. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Actually, yes, it was. It might have been around WoD or something. So, point being, this was when people heard of a good idea and they threw money at it. And this was also when the infamous MMO rule was established. The less you know about a game, the more incredible it is. So, when someone appears on Kickstarter and tells you that they are making an MMO with 12 planets, all of which have no loading screens, you can play 59 different classes, and there is a ever-evolving world, and it just has everything you've ever wanted, people were like, yes, sign me up. I'm giving you my money right now, make it. Problem was, it was a promise that was sold to you, and people just had no idea how to actually make it. So I think that was really the problem with Kickstarter MMOs. Kickstarter MMOs now are a bit of a meme, rightfully so, because they were never really vetted for how realistic they are. And I think that's a problem.
World. As I mentioned at the start of the video, there are quite a few MMOs out right now that are using a crowdfunding.
When was the last time you've heard about crowdfunding? They dried up quickly, but I remember everything was popping up on Kickstarter. I think nowadays they have, like, their rules are a bit more strict. That might be why, or at least I hope so. Because this was the Wild West. The last time I heard about it must have been like Ashes of Creation, right? It's like the last big one I remember. And I mean, Ashes of Creation, the thing with Ashes of Creation that people tend to forget is that it was funded in large part by Steven himself. So it is a bit different fundamentally because they used crowdfunding to bolster their resources, not to get resources.
Platform, or at least are currently being funded and developed. There was even a rather high-profile launch from this platform just this year. Albion Online was an MMO that launched due to crowdfunding and had moderate levels of success. These other MMOs like Ashes of Creation, Crowfall, Star Citizen, and Camelot Unchained have far more ambitious goals than Albion.
None of them ever happened. Chronicles of Illyria, I'm pretty sure, is you know.
And for some of these games, their goals seem to endlessly stretch on. Star Citizen. I think we as gamers naturally should be wary of some of these promises, and also remember that a typical MMO takes 4 to 5 years to launch. So don't feel embarrassed about supporting one of these games.
That's the problem.
Just do so with the right mindset. There are an awful lot of MMOs on the horizon using this funding strategy, and not a whole lot to show for it yet. It is interesting to note that the crowdfunded MMOs that are coming out are nearly all sandboxes. This is an interesting observation, as the age of WoW...
I think it is people... Because I think World of Warcraft did something, especially Vanilla WoW, right? Vanilla WoW felt like an open world where you could do anything. And that is why we are now returning to this idea of the sandbox MMO. Because I think what we really want is a world. I think that's what people really want when they talk about an MMO. Whereas World of Warcraft now is a sandbox. It tells the story of an expansion. You know, we just spent like an hour talking about that. I think the next big MMO will just be a world. And the things that happen in the world is the MMO aspect of it. You know, the RPG aspect of it. It's not that it's going to have patch 1.65 comes out next week, be excited. Yes. It's just no. This is a world in which things happen. And I think that's going to be like the next big thing. And most of it is going to revolve around a sandbox.
WoW and its different
That's my prediction.
were all about being theme park experiences.
Which is also why I think Ashes of Creation, the node system, is exactly what I mean. That is emergent storytelling. It is a world in which you live and in which things sometimes happen. What happens when your neighbors start to siege your node? Well, that is a classic RPG experience.
I like to call a developer-guided experience. Sandbox titles are more player-driven, and as WoW reached insane levels of popularity, many people thought that this sandbox genre had nearly become extinct. You had a few games that had hybrid models, sandbox elements, and a theme park format, but with the number of crowdfunded MMOs on the horizon, it looks like sandboxes are making a comeback. Theme park MMOs such as WoW in many ways took the sandbox market and simplified it.
Yes.
Which, in my opinion, in certain ways...
I think originally it was a development limitation. I think this is one of those things that is... We come back to, like, it just being... Like, the same way I talk about servers. I don't think in the next generation MMO, there will be servers as we know them now. When you join the game, your first question won't be, on what server are you playing? On what faction are you playing? I don't think questions like this will exist in the next big thing, because there are technical limitations. The reason why servers existed is because we could not have all people playing on the same server. It was as simple as that. Like, on the tech side, servers will exist. Of course they will. But they will be merged together so that it actually feels like a cohesive world. It's not going to be like completely isolated units, I think anyway. Or they will somehow... I've always been a mega server enjoyer. I want one big thing I can talk to anyone, anywhere, and I don't need to ask seven questions before we even start playing. And I think the same thing goes for the sandbox, not the sandbox, for the theme park design. It is a tech limitation because they just couldn't pull off a sandbox every 2 years. It's just impossible. They're not going to attach a whole different game as an expansion. So what they had to do is downscope. And then the next expansion was like, wait, we've already had one expansion, we can't go back to the old world, and we can't really do anything with this expansion as well, so we might as well just add another one. And again, we need to scope down. And that's where we arrive today. We have a bunch of different land masses around the world, and that's it. You know?
Rest the market as a
What happened to Azeroth? Still has the sword. We don't talk about the sword. What sword?
whole.
No sword.
It's quite exciting to see the market trending back towards a more free-form sandbox format, a format that I think, frankly speaking, is far more sustainable than a theme park format.
It is.
A sandbox format doesn't require as much developer interaction.
Who talks about a quest that they did 2 years ago? No one cares. What they talk about are the things they got up to with their buddies. Some of my favorite memories from gaming are like random sieges we did in a game like Rust. You know, when we found a base and we attacked the base. Obviously, Rust is very different, but Rust is a sandbox. It illustrates what I mean. You know, you remember those types of things. So imagine those things happening in an MMO. It is the best kind of emergent storytelling. Nothing about it could ever be replicated again, which makes for a good story. When we're going to, like, in 10 years, we're going to be talking about the siege of Umdurat. I don't know, random name I literally just came up on the spot. That's what we're going to be talking about. It's going to happen in Ashes of Creation, right? Right? Surely.
For example, a Elder Scrolls, Skyrim, or
Surely.
Oblivion. These games have tool sets which really make them popular. The games themselves aren't incredibly, unique or even story-rich, but people are able to create these insane mods and create different...
What do you mean by sandbox MMO? A sandbox MMO is basically one in which the systems are obviously predefined, but a sandbox MMO usually refers to where the players kind of make the story, to a large extent. Obviously, you will have your usual quest givers and blah, 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 right? But the term sandbox MMO currently is kind of ill-defined because it has been a lot of things, and now Ashes of Creation is sort of changing that. But, like, as an example, in Arcade, I believe, you could own, like, castles, and you could fight for those castles and stuff like that. That is not a game design system. Those are players using a system to tell a story. That's usually what people mean by sandbox stuff. Like, if we use the Ashes of Creation example, right? So you're going to be able to have cities. You make the city, you tax people. Let's say you tax them 70%. Suddenly your people revolt. All of that is a sandbox encounter. The game designer didn't make it. You made it as the player. You were given the tools, just like you are in a sandbox, and you build your little sandcastle. So that's what usually you mean by that. I don't know about New World, and I don't know much about Arcade as well. A lot of these old school sandbox MMOs, I played a bunch, but they were kind of dead whenever I played them, so I just went back to playing WoW. So I don't have much experience with them. Conceptually, that's what it is, though. It's players making the story, players making the world, and players just using the tools given to them by the game to sort of shape what actually happens. And it's not like a patch drops and suddenly you're sieging a city. No, it could happen on a random Wednesday.
Modules with insane levels of detail. That's what made the game live on. That's what makes games like Skyrim still playable in 2018. Anyway, you're probably worrying about the future, or wondering about it at least. These MMOs might not be in the end as they're advertised, at least currently. Maybe they change, but they certainly have some serious backing and serious leadership. Camelot Unchained is led by Mark Jacobs, Crowfall by previous Shadowbane devs, and Star Citizen has the guy behind the Freelancer series. These aren't strangers to the gaming world and could have serious potential to create some memorable MMO worlds. Still, the MMO market as a whole is still in a bit of a flux at the moment. It's going to take one of these crowdfunded MMOs to have a good level of success to invite publishers and...
Oh my god, look at how... Oh, we've come a long way. Yeah, we've come a really long way with
back to the
Ashes.
space to potentially chase new AAA MMOs or new IPs. So don't be so quick to wish for the failure of these crowdfunded games, as their failures could have serious ramifications. Who knows? Maybe we are a bit better off without these big money suits getting involved in our games, and I sort of like the idea of crowdfunding having a direct line to customers over having a bit of a buffer in some sort of dev to publisher relationship.
Yeah, I think the problem is talent. I think just these crowdfunded MMOs just do not have... It's not that they don't have the talent, it's that they don't have the pull of the talent. Like, imagine how much money you would have to spend to build a team from scratch, and then you need to add building the game on top of that. You know, it is like infinitely more money than any AAA studio would need to spend because they already have a team. So the chances of you pulling something off that a already pre-established development team couldn't are very slim. So, you know,
Only time will tell in the end how things play out. I haven't lost hope yet. If at least 1 or 2 of these MMOs in the works succeed...
Ashes of Creation is the only one that's actually seeming to be, I don't know what's going on with Star Citizen, I don't care because it's in space.
That's still 1 to 2 more successful new IPs on the market for us. We have to take our victories where we can. What MMO are you most excited for? Let me know in the comments below, and why. Thank you for watching.
All right, I mean, this is a pretty old video, but I mean, I think a lot of it still holds up. I'm gonna link it in chat. Basically, yeah. The long and short of it is that I don't think the genre is dead. I think that the genre is stagnant. There just hasn't been a leap since World of Warcraft. I think that's the problem. I think the genre has been the same for a decade. Of course, it's not growing. Of course, it's not attracting a new audience. And the audience that it does have, I think a lot of people are just tired of the same thing. Again, I think VR will shake up all of this a lot. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with that.